I am Brooke Mulligan, and with me is Victoria Abbott, one of our
Hi.
great associate attorneys. We've taken over the conference room again from Dawn to talk about some of the celebrities. Today we're going to be talking about legal separation and the difference between that and a dissolution. We have had a couple of big celebrities come out recently and talk about how they've been separated for a long time. So we have Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. We have Meryl Streep and her husband, Don Gummer. And then we also have Hugh Jackman and Deborah Lee Furness. They've all recently said they are separated. I forget if – I don't think any of them said they're going to be moving forward with the dissolution. Not that they have to tell us. But I think it's really interesting – an interesting point for us to talk about because people may not realize the difference
between legal
separation or even the date of separation and how that's impactful. So – I guess we should start with the difference between legal separation and a dissolution. So one is a divorce. You are, single people at the end of it. There's a judgment dividing all of your property. Legal separation is different. You are not legally single people. You're still married but separated. And there are a few reasons why you might want to do that. For example, if there's a health insurance concern, you may want to do a legal separation instead of a dissolution. Or if you are concerned about some timing, you can file for legal separation without the same residency requirements as a divorce. Are there any other differences you can think of?
I think one of the main ones we see too is religious reasons. Some religions don't accept divorce or whatever it may be. So religion. The other thing is sometimes people think there's hope of reconciliation. That word should not be tricky for me, but it is.
We don't deal with that too much, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, we don't. And I think in a lot of these cases, I don't know actually for these parties, have they actually filed for legal separation?
No.
Or is it just that they are living
They're living
separately?
separate, which is something I wanted to touch on because I think these terms all sound very similar. Date of separation, legal separation. No, we're separated. No, we're legally separated. And I think it might not be clear. So your date of separation, and this comes into play whether it's a legal separation or a dissolution, is the day when the marriage is irrevocably broken, you've communicated that, and your actions are consistent with that. I remember in law school some very interesting cases about the date of separation. My favorite one that, of course, I forgot the name of, but I remember what happened very well. They had been living apart. The husband was living on his boat, but he would –
the yacht story.
Right, and he would come back to the family home. He'd do all of his laundry there. They would I think they were a pretty well-off kind of socialite kind of couple, so they would go to events together.
They were still holding each other out as husband and wife.
Yeah, that's that phrase, the holding each other out as husband and wife. And they also looked to a bunch of the cards he gave to his wife while they were separated. And you might be thinking, not you, but some might be thinking, why is that date so important? It's important because upon the date of your separation, the characterization of assets and debts change.
From community to separate.
Exactly. So when you're married, everything you get, except in some circumstances like gift or inheritance, is presumed to be community before marriage or after that date of separation. So it's not after the date of divorce. It's that date of separation. It stops being characterized that way. And it can be very important, especially if you're going through, let's say, a very long divorce. We've seen divorces that are multi-year.
Absolutely. Yeah, we always advise clients if it's not already been communicated, don't continue to act as husband and wife.
Right.
Don't go to the public and to each other. And again, we look, and it's kind of a he said, she said, right? Because we're looking at, were you guys going out to events? Like you said, the cards, intimacy. How were you guys treating each other during that time? And so it can become a little bit of it's challenging to prove at times, right? Because everybody has different interpretations of what maybe was.
And so I think a great example of that is Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she ever said the date of their separation. I don't know. I know she did not do that. But she has said they've been separated for a long time, including before last year's Oscars.
Yes. In fact, I recall her doing an interview recently. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. That they actually went to the Oscars I think this is close to verbatim of what she said, not as husband and wife, but after the infamous slap, she kind of left as his wife, she says.
Right.
And I also know there was some therapy perhaps in between there, which also impacts whether or not the court's going to find there was a clear separation.
Have you ever had to tell your client not to go to therapy if they don't want to mess with their date of separation?
I haven't had to tell my client not to go to therapy, but I've had to say probably stop communicating as babe, baby, honey, sweetie, those like pet names that you commonly use, or inquiring about stop communicating like you're in a relationship if you are not trying to appear as you're in a relationship, right?
And so what Jada Pinkett Smith said is really interesting, but I think if Will were to fight her on the date of if they went and got divorced and were to fight her on a date of if
they were to fight over the date of separation.
If they were to fight over the date of separation, the court can't know what's on your mind. So they have to look at objective things. And I think they're going to look at, they went to the Oscars together. Mm-hmm. They were holding each other's arms. He thanked his wife during the speech. And they left together. That, to an objective person who can't know their minds, is probably going to look like they are still holding themselves out as husband and wife.
Yeah. And even amongst each other, right, between the parties, right? If you're still engaging in therapy, for example, like we just said, that doesn't really communicate to each party that there's a clear intent to separate even. So it's very factual based is probably a better way for me to have worded it instead of he said, she said. But it's a very fact-based analysis. Mm-hmm. And obviously everybody's going to have different perspectives if there's even contention in the first place.
Exactly. And so we are talking about there being an issue with the date of separation. I will also say I think it's only come up in 1 or 2 cases my entire career, which is I think 4 years now.
Yeah. I currently have a case that's dealing with date of separation. I actually have I just had 2 cases back to back. So ironically, it's come up a lot in this last 6 months even for me. But
is it because of assets acquired and they're fighting over that?
One of the cases, was because of assets acquired, and then one was it's more for filing purposes, I would say, than anything. But
interesting. Well, so that's another thing that date of separation can impact is spousal support with the difference between a long-term and short-term marriage. Absolutely. So a marriage over 10 years, and that would be from date of marriage to date of separation, is presumed to be long-term. Yeah. And that doesn't mean if you were married for 9.5 years, the court won't treat that as a long-term marriage or make spousal support orders based on a long-term marriage. Yeah. But it's much easier when you hit that 10-plus mark.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the biggest impacts, one thing we didn't touch on is that they're procedurally pretty much the same in terms of actually like legal separation and dissolution, right? You're filing a petition. Right. It's really the difference of indicating on a box, essentially, on the form.
Literally.
Right? And then also to highlight the fact that if the respondent files a response that they want to be divorced, then the court is going to grant the divorce. But that's an aside. I just was touching on procedurally that they're the same, but that if you do a legal separation, you won't be able to remarry. And I saw Hugh Jackman is now allegedly dating somebody. I don't know. But, of course, if, let's say, they were legally separated status-wise in a legal term, not just separated.
Yes, understood. And we're in California, not Australia.
Yes, he's not going to be able to remarry, of course, and then they would have to go back and do the dissolution process, essentially, and get a judgment, so forth and so on.
You're doing it kind of twice. I remember learning about legal separation in law school and just not really understanding the purpose of it, but obviously I'm not every person, and so it does work for some and not others.
I was taught it was largely a religious decision, and in practice I've mainly seen it be utilized for that purpose. I don't actually have a lot of clients who come to me.
I've really only seen it for filing purposes.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that there is a difference, even though it doesn't happen very often. I think it's interesting to have both of those options.
Yeah.
I've heard consults where clients maybe aren't sure what they want to do, kind of touching on that.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going to reconcile, so let me just do a legal separation.
What do you typically advise clients? I typically don't advise them to proceed with a legal separation if there's okay.
I say, I just don't think it's ultimately worth it.
I agree.
Because you're going to, unless it's a religious choice, I think.
Obviously, this is fact specific too. I'm not asking. I'm making you a general.
No, but generally, I would say when people come to us to end their relationship, a divorce is going to be the right call for them.
That's what I ask because that's also my opinion. I feel like legal separation, and again, fact specific. Sometimes it makes sense, but I think people sometimes get confused or think legal separation has different ramifications than it does, or that it maybe has a different meaning. And what it really is that you're just ultimately probably gonna have to go through the process again.
Yeah.
And if you really do think you're gonna reconcile, like truly, then maybe just hold off on any filings for the time being.
You just don't want to do everything twice. It's expensive and difficult to to do it twice.
Yeah.
But of course, if anyone wants to come to us for a legal
separation, no worries.
We will help you. We know exactly what to do.